Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly phenomenal piece of philosophy drawn straight from the writings of Zhu Feng in the chapter of Preaching Tao. And we're tackling a massive foundational question. Where do your thoughts actually come from? I mean, if you've ever stopped in the middle of a frantic day and wondered why your brain is totally fixated on a specific worry or how your internal consciousness interacts with the physical world around you, well, this explainer is going to map it all out. We are exploring the dialectics of mind and form. It's a text that completely reframes how we view human consciousness and objective reality. So let's discover this together, step by step. Okay, let's dive right into this, because to really grasp this text, we first need to clearly define our two main characters, mind and form. In this philosophy, mind is your consciousness. It's your thoughts, your feelings, your internal awareness. Form, which is also referred to as phenomenon in the text, represents structure, reality, the literal physical manifestations all around us. And the core baseline rule of this entire philosophy is this: humans are originally without mind. The mind arises entirely, exclusively from form. Without reality, there is absolutely no consciousness. So at its most fundamental level, your consciousness is actually a reactionary entity. So that brings us to our first major concept. Form creates the mind. To really understand how dependent our consciousness is on physical reality, just think about your own daily sensory experience. Your five senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, they're essentially antennas. For example, without the physical existence of a computer, you simply wouldn't possess a computer mind or any concept of it. Without the physical form of parents, there is no parental mind. What's really interesting here is how the text states that myriad forms give rise to myriad minds. Whatever physically appears before your eyes generates a corresponding thought. When your visual field is empty, that specific mind, that specific train of thought, literally ceases to exist. Now, knowing how reactionary we are leads us directly into what we'll call the mundane world trap. Because the forms around us in the modern world are just constantly changing, our minds are thrown into an exhausting, endless state of reaction. Think about scrolling on your phone. You are constantly reacting to new images, new forms, new stimuli. When forms change that fast, the mind frantically follows suit. The text vividly describes the state, saying a chaotic mind is unsettled, the spirit cannot reside within, making one like a wandering soul, lost and lamenting. The author equates this restless feeling to having a thief nearby. You're just always on edge, always reacting, and you're never truly at peace. And this creates a stark, vital contrast in how we can choose to live our lives. The ordinary, mundane person attaches their mind to every single passing form, smell, taste, and touch. Because their consciousness rigidly follows reality, they're chaotic and restless. But contrast that with the sage. Even as the myriad forms around them shift, break, and change, the sage's mind just ignores the turbulence. They remain completely serene and steadfast, anchored to a deeper peace rather than being tossed around by the chaotic, shifting surface of the world. Let's move on and see how this builds. Stepping into the realms of the sage and the celestial. So how do we actually climb out of that chaos? This brilliantly illustrates the entire roadmap of spiritual evolution, and it's based entirely on how you react to the objective world. We start at the bottom as the mundane person, who just follows form, a victim to reality. Then we evolve to the sage, who actively ignores changing forms. But the evolution goes further. The celestial being takes it a massive step up by actually transforming form. And at the absolute peak, the super celestial being creates form. It's a complete journey from being a slave to reality to becoming the architect of it. Let's unpack that state of the sage first. The text beautifully notes, flowers bloom and fall, clouds roll and disperse. Basically, no matter how varied, unpredictable, or disappointing the forms of the world are, the sage just lets the world do its thing. Their mind remains calm and clear, shining brightly like the sun and moon. They've successfully decoupled their internal peace from their external circumstances. The outside world can be a raging storm, but their internal room is quiet. But then we reach the celestial being, where the mind gains active, transformative power over reality. A celestial being transforms forms by changing their psychological relationship to them. Think about being stuck in an agonizing traffic jam. For most, that's darkness, that's suffering. The celestial being uses their perspective to reframe that exact moment into an opportunity for quiet reflection, turning darkness into dawn, winding paths into straight roads, and suffering into sweetness. By understanding the true, malleable essence of reality, they take discomfort and actively turn it into what the text calls celestial melodies. Which brings us to the absolute pinnacle, the supercelestial state.
So, the crucial point is right here at the top of the ladder. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness. What does this famously dense concept actually mean for us in practice? It means that the supercelestial being doesn't just reframe existing reality. They realize that reality itself is a blank canvas. Consciousness literally holds the paintbrush. All forms are empty of inherent nature. They only hold the meaning we assign to them. At this ultimate level, forms arise purely from the mind itself. The mind is form, and form is cessation.
Imagine living and operating at this level. You exist with absolutely no attachments, no obstructions, no underlying fears, no worries, and zero troubles. The text says that wherever this mind creates, there are green mountains and clear waters. When your consciousness is entirely quiet and fundamentally unbound, there is always this profound, unshakable sense of tranquility. It represents the ultimate mastery of human consciousness over objective reality. But wait, before we get too comfortable, we have to talk about the boundaries, the constraints, and the pitfalls of Dharma. Reaching these spiritual heights comes with extreme dangers. And we need to clearly define Dharma here as rigid dogmas, strict rules, or fixed ways of thinking. The text warns us that if the mind creates these rigid rules, it becomes a deadly constraint. The universe is incredibly fluid, right? The proverb, 30 years on the east bank of the river, 30 years on the west bank, perfectly illustrates that times inevitably change. Relying on old frameworks in a new era is a massive trap. Clinging tightly to strict Dharma leads directly to spiritual death. So it's a very delicate balance. Clinging too tightly to rules brings constraint and rigidity, but swinging entirely the other way, harboring what the text calls non-dharma, is equally disastrous. This means abandoning all natural bounds, believing you're somehow above all eternal teachings. Pushing beyond these natural limits leads to unchecked arrogance and constant conflict. The text notes that even if you possess incredible mental power, operating in this arrogant, boundless state means you're going to suffer immensely, finding conflict everywhere you go. It's basically a one-way ticket to hell. So, how do we balance this? Enter the holographic perspective. How do we avoid clinging to rigid rules without abandoning all boundaries? Well, it all depends on your realm of understanding. If you're stuck in a confined space, looking at a tiny, flat, two-dimensional slice of the world, contradictions are literally everywhere. But if one generates the mind from a holographic perspective, meaning you step back and see the entire, interconnected, three-dimensional whole of the universe, there is absolutely no contradiction. The puzzle pieces suddenly fit together perfectly. And this brings us to the profound, continuous cycle of existence. It begins with the way of the mind, which is consciousness, and the way of form, which is structure. These two forces don't just sit next to each other in a vacuum. They endlessly interact, reverse, and cycle together. Consciousness feeds into reality, reality feeds back into consciousness. As they cycle like a dynamic engine, immense energy is generated. All the dynamic changes and miraculous powers of the universe are contained right within this living, breathing interaction between what we think and what actually is. As the author brings this profound text to a close, it's noted that the gate of Chanyuan is about to shut, leaving us just this one method to play with and master. So I want to leave you with a final provocative question based on the roadmap we've uncovered today. In the dialectic of your own life, will you allow your mind to be endlessly chaste and chaotic? Will you remain a slave to form, or will you evolve, transcend, and become a creator of it? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable philosophy with me. Keep reflecting on these ideas, and I'll see you in the next explainer.